Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is quite the, I have to say, inspirational, aspirational, and exciting conference. I've loved my 2 days at Impact. So thank you all for having me. Dan, I hope, has been keeping all of you entertained. He certainly does it backstage. But Mr. Mayor, I am really thrilled to be in conversation with you. I should start by, there's so much that we have covered in the brief conversations we've had backstage and earlier today, but I should start by saying, so my first trip to Warsaw was in 1999, and when I landed 2 days ago, I asked the young woman who greeted me what I should do in the city when I had time, and she said to go on a biking tour, like to bike around Warsaw. It's something that's a lot of young people do now and are excited about. But I should say, congratulations, you just won re-election with almost 60% of the vote. Lots of energy, excitement, and enthusiasm about your election. And so I want to start by asking you, what excites you about Poland's democratic resurgence?
Well, good afternoon. It's an honor to have this conversation with you. We were saying it for the past 8 years that we are going to be back. We will be back, quoting Arnold Schwarzenegger. and we succeeded, but it was thanks to the people, mostly young people and women. So it was exciting, not only for us in Poland, but I would submit to you also in Europe and in the world, because there was no level playing field in the elections, and yet we were successful in beating the populist, winning that, thanks to this incredible mobilization of the people. Most of them are here, right? Yeah. Those who are mobilized.
Well, it's, you know, you as you referenced, you had a successful set of elections last fall. Obviously, last month you're preparing. There's elections coming up in June and next year. How do you use your platform to keep voters, particularly, as you said, it was a lot of women and young people who turned out to vote. How do you use your platform to keep them engaged and enthusiastic?
Well, we just had lunch together with Valerie Jarrett, and she was basically saying the same thing, which is that when you talk about democracy and the onslaught of populism in the world, you have to translate democracy into individual rights, especially among the young people. Because people, when you talk about the rule of law, when you talk about democracy, this is too abstract. And I think that the success of all of us, but also not only of then opposition politicians, but also of NGOs, people who really got engaged, and people who were just talking to their neighbors and within their families about the importance of that election, was to explain to the people that this election was about our individual freedoms, and that the populists are encroaching upon them, and that it was about our country being free, modern, European. And that's why people got engaged, because the young and of course women, you know, thought that, and rightly so, that their freedoms are being taken away. And it's not easy, because, you know, the turnout in the local elections was not so high. And we were, of course, very much worried about the turnout in the European elections, because we have to keep on doing what we are doing, explaining how important it is also for the future. And that's what we were doing on our platforms. And the thing that we're particularly proud of is that a few years back, we thought how to engage young people. And we've decided with Sławek Nitras, with Barbara Nowacka and others, to actually create this jamboree for the young people, where we can engage them, where we could talk about the future of Poland, and not only about politics, but also about artificial intelligence, about women's rights, about the state of psychology in our country. And it helped us to choose a lot of bright people who wanted to engage, and we were actually listening to them, and we knew what topics are important, what kind of language do we need to employ. And proudly, many of them actually got involved later on. Some of them went later on into politics and are now proud members of the Polish parliament or our city councillors, but many of them are just simply very active in social life, in non-governmental organizations and so on and so forth, philanthropies. So we need to engage the young people as much as possible, because they're actually driving the debate forwards, and they're translating all the jargon that politicians use into normal language that everyone understands.
Yeah, and I think that you just nailed the point about translating it into language that people understand, because if you don't understand why an election matters in your own life, it's hard to convince people to go out and vote. And frankly, I think one of the reasons your election is relevant to the world is because this pushing against some of these populist movements and attitudes is a challenge in many places, including in our country. I've been involved in a few elections back home, and in 2016, I think when we were about to elect the first woman president, people did not necessarily understand. A lot of women didn't understand how high the stakes were, in part because some people also just took for granted, assumed. I always think when you're far ahead in the polls, it's not necessarily a good thing. You have to run like you're losing, no matter what. And for some people in the U.S., it took what happened in 2016. It took having, frankly, I have my personal opinion, but a rather extreme form of leadership that wasn't necessarily good for the people. It was a very narcissistic form of government. Then it resulted in an election where we had a sitting president who didn't accept the elections, resulted in January 6th, the January 6th attacks on our Capitol. And it took that to wake up some people to this notion that you can't take democracy for granted. And we were talking about this earlier today at lunch. I'm somebody who didn't grow up in a democracy. I didn't come to the United States until I was at university. And so the opportunity, the ability to say, okay, if I care about something, then that's happening locally, I can do something about it by who I elect. So what keeps you up, in part, I want to reference something else we were talking about, because a lot of times we like to blame each other. It's like the politicians need to do this better, and the social media leaders need to do this better, and everyone needs to do it better. But the reality is, it takes all legs of the stool to be working. It's, as you pointed out, civil society and government are part of that. But what keeps you up at night when you think about, all right, I have to get through this? When I spoke to you the other day, you were dealing with a fire in your city. What keeps you up and worries you the most as you think about leadership and being a leader today?
Well, I mean, I didn't grow up in a democracy either. It makes two of us, because I grew up in a communist Poland. And the miracle of Poland in the 90s and later on and today was this incredible energy of the Polish people was untapped. And Poland became this success history, and we were achieving. I would say the most in our history. We were catching up with the West. We were punching above our weight, and it was just miraculous. So when I saw that this chance is being partly wasted by the government, because fortunately the people remain resilient, and the non-governmental organizations remain resilient. I mean, that's what keeps me going. Besides, I got to do my job to read a good book in order to sort of propel democracy, because we don't want this huge chance of the Polish people to be wasted. And the thing is that I remember I was explaining it to our American friends like 7, 8 years ago, and they were like just looking at me like, what this barbarian from the East know, Hungarian problem, Polish problem. And then when President Trump was elected, and when the Capitol was under attack, people actually in the U.S., my American friends, understood, wow, okay, this is not only a Hungarian problem, but a Polish problem, but that's a problem of democracy. And of course now, coming back to how to get people engaged, I mean, we live in this world which is so polarized. And some people live, under this cloud of polarized public opinion, social media, in which whatever you say can be used against you to a much greater magnitude than before. That it really takes guts and courage to say what you believe in. Because, I mean, if you talk about women's rights, if you talk about LGBTQ rights, if you talk about equality, if you talk about the right approach towards our historical heritage that we should be proud of, if you talk about the European Union, which sometimes people tend to think is boring, and how much you want to engage it, I mean, everything can be taken out of context and twisted and used against you. So it takes courage, because there are many politicians who just say, okay, I'm not going to touch it, it's too controversial. And then it's like, their narrative is so bland and about nothing. So fortunately, now we found this courage, And that's why we won the elections, because we were able to see the most important challenges and also to project that image that we really want to tackle them. And people were because of that mobilized. Of course, they were mobilized also because of what, and mostly because of what the previous government was doing. Yeah. But that's actually energizes us and gives us the power to go on.
Well, you said something at lunch that really stayed with me, because this concept of courage and resilience, I think you need that to be not just in elected office anymore, just to be in public whether it's a business leader or an entrepreneur. There are so many young people. I've been struck just walking in the halls here, how many young men and women I have met who are entrepreneurs, business, in universities. And in the olden days, you could have somewhat of a private life. It's hard to do that today, at least it feels like that in the United States. We've talked about the role that social media has played in our democracy, in social and civil discourse. What is your view on the benefits of having social media in your life as an elected official, and the negatives, and what advice do you give politicians coming behind you?
Well, 10, 12, 15 years ago, I thought, I was one of the first politicians who used social media in political campaigning in 2009. And I thought, social media a force for good, because then there were, there's like a panoply of opinions with which we can get acquainted, and all the voices will be heard, and so on and so forth. Quite naive. Now we are, of course, closed off in our bubbles, and we get fed the information that just reinforces our views and beliefs. So, of course, we can bemoan the fact that that's how the algorithm works, that we can bemoan the facts that, polarization sells, and so on. But at the end of the day, and I do bemoan the fact, but at the end of the day, the responsibility lies with us. Because if you're not going to be lazy, and we are not going just to follow, the algorithm, but we are going to open our eyes. And for example, if Amazon shows you the recommendations of the books, follow them, because that's probably something that interests you. But look further, and try to look at other opinions. Read some of the opinions that not necessarily are shown in your feed. Engage with people in real life, not only on social media. But that requires a lot of resilience, a lot of time, and you have to be aware how it all works. So instead of just criticizing how the world works, we need to teach our children and teach ourselves that whatever is fed to us is not necessarily the only opinion. That we should engage other people, and frankly, that's why I love being mayor. Because when you're a minister, or if you're a prime minister, it's more difficult because you're driven in a limousine, and that's normal, by the way, because you have to be protected. And if you are just a mayor, you just walk the streets of your city and you get engaged by all kinds of different people, which is so refreshing. So don't close your eyes, just don't follow the algorithm. Expand the people on your, the acquaintances on your social network. And most importantly, just move around and talk to people who are walking the streets of your city, not only engage on the media.
There's nothing like being in conversation, I think, like this with somebody as opposed to online. When I wrote my memoir 2 years ago, I decided to title it, which confused some people, but the title of my memoir is Both and it is because that is how I was raised, is that you can be both and. I was both and. I was a product of immigrant parents, Indian father, Pakistani mother, grew up in Saudi Arabia, moved to the United States, and our whole life, and this is a gift my parents were able to give us, which is the gift of travel. And so every summer we were able to travel to different parts of the world, and my father in particular took pride in having conversations with people who had different perspectives. And it wasn't because he had doubt in his own belief and values. It was, I want to understand what it is to be in your shoes. And so his friends would say to him, why do you have these conversations in places where even angels fear to tread? And I think having those difficult conversations, the ability to debate with somebody is a value that we should be teaching our children.
Absolutely. My father was a jazz musician, and according to him, I wasn't too talented. So, and of course, we couldn't travel. Like, I traveled for the first time when I was 16 to to West Berlin, and I was just, flabbergasted, and I was just trying to show a brave face that it doesn't, make any effect on me. But anyhow, so my father taught me just one thing, to just learn the languages.
Yeah.
Because then you will just learn different perspectives. You will think differently. And I think that was one of the best lessons of my life, and it turned out I was proud to prove to my father that I do have a musical ear after all. But anyhow, so learn different perspectives. I mean, languages help, but even if you don't learn languages, just try to listen to different people. Read as many books as possible. Try to expand your horizons. And that's, again, an antidote to the social media life we live. So this is absolutely crucial, and that's why we try to build, Jacek Jaśkowiak is with us, the mayor of Poznań, we try to build cities which are resilient to crises, but which are open, transparent, which are diverse, because this is which act as a magnet for all the people who want to come and live in our cities, because that's what really enriches us.
Yes, that is agreed. Another issue you've shown some really bold leadership on is climate and green energy. And you're a member of the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, brought together in part by former mayor of New York City, my former mayor, Mike Bloomberg. I'm curious what your view is about mayors' role in the world today. We've talked a lot about leadership and democracy, but it's an interesting...
Well, because my trajectory is pretty unusual, because first I was a member of the European Parliament, then I was a minister, a member of Polish Parliament, and then I became mayor. Usually it's the other way around.
Yeah.
But today, mayors and local politicians play this incredibly important role. Because in a sense, we give the direction and our councillors to what's really happening on the ground. And when I was becoming a mayor, fighting my first mayoral elections, everyone was saying, after being a minister and so on, you will finally have this opportunity to focus on developing your city, on the future and so on. And boom, we had one crisis after another. Pandemics, wars, migration crises, those are not the things that usually mayors deal with. But that's what we were confronted with. And we actually did more, of course, the people, because without the solidarity of the Polish people, we wouldn't have this incredible, amazing response to the refugee crisis. But it turned out that we are on the first line. And again, we are also on the front line when it comes to the climate change, because it's the cities which are responsible for most of the emissions, and that's exactly the cities that can do as much as possible to translate those ideas and those targets that no one understands into real life opportunities, new jobs, clean air, and so on. But again, it's difficult because, populists love to attack people who talk about fighting climate change. They will just grab one detail and they will just hammer you on the head. C40 produced this report about the future, that maybe in the future we should start thinking about using different possibilities of feeding people with cricket flour and so on, like this futuristic vision. So I was pounded on the head that I will feed bugs to people. Many people were laughing, but others were like, what's going on? And there were proud politicians on the right eating Wiener Schnitzel, proving that they are, really proud conservative Poles. But that's what's happening today. That again, it takes courage to actually move the debate forwards and to explain to the people that if we don't want the planet to disappear, every other day on Twitter, it's like, oh, Trzaskowski said the planet burns. Now Warsaw burns, That's what they do. It's incredible, But if you don't address that, you become completely irrelevant. Because the young people really care about their future, and this is not just about politics, about getting people interested. It's about being relevant. That's why mayors have to take the lead on climate change, which does not mean that we have to do everything. Because if it's not well prepared, like Green Deal in agriculture, if there is a certain hypocrisy that we demand our farmers to do incredible things when it comes to standards, and then we open our doors for grain from Ukraine with no standards, then of course it becomes counterproductive. So you have to be courageous, but you also have to be smart about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Final question. You've been involved in a lot of elections. There's an election coming up next year. How are you feeling about that?
Well, I'm sure that a good candidate will win. And No, on a very serious note, we really proved to the whole world in October, thanks to all of you here, that we can win, that we can actually win with the populists even when the going's tough. And even if the mobilization was not there 100% for the local elections, maybe not 100% for the European elections, although everything is in your hands, guys. So go and vote 9th of June in the European elections. We want European and courageous Poland. But I'm sure that in the presidential elections, whoever runs, that we will again show this incredible mobilization, and we will choose someone who looks into the future and who wants proud Poland, European Poland, open and tolerant, guys. That's what we need.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.